evening. Today, I will be presenting on Islam Transformatif, theorizing the liberation theology for Indonesian Muslim society. Previously, I thank very much for Dr. Elmo Gonzaga as well as Dr. Nasri to organize this workshop nicely. It is really an honor for me to invite for this great project doing theory in Southeast Asia. Okay, I'm going to start it. As we know that religions, specifically Islam, is not only as aspiration to practice the worship, but also it is currently as aspiration for both reverence and conceptual theory, not only trying to diagnose the average Muslim people, to contextualize the word problem, but also giving the alternative within the social science for their own society. In the context of Muslim world, for instance, some of Islamic thinkers already initiate on specifically on Islamic liberation theology, such as Hassan Hanafi, Asghar Ali Engineers, Farid Essad, Samir Amin, and also Hamid Dabasi. If you're trying to compare, trying to trace it back, it seems that this Islamic liberation theology got inspirations from liberation theology in Latin America, specifically on Gustavo Guterres' work. In Southeast Asia, specifically in Indonesia, Islamic liberation theology has been discussed and popularized by some of Indonesian's Muslim thinker, such as Abu Rahman Wahid, Kunto Wijoyo, Mansur Faki, and also Muslim Abdul Rahman. Nevertheless, their voices are relatively voiceless. There are some of factors why it's happening. Both Indonesian languages, geographical position that far away from the Middle East at the centers of Islamic civilization, cause the marginalized position and underrepresents of Islamic intellectual figure in the world. In addition, in the context of Indonesia, both the U.S. and European social science legacy that have been inherited by most of Indonesian scholars who are studying in overseas and then lecturing in public university and private universities in Indonesia predominantly have marginalized the Indonesian Islamic scholars' contribution. So this is so because of this, I'm trying to rise one of Indonesian Muslim scholars that trying to conceptualize one of Islamic liberation theology. Here, Muslim Abdul Rahman Wahid work there is really a concern and trying to advocate and stand at the poor and lowest people. Some of this work that you can see. So, how is the idea Islam transformative come off? If you're going back during Suharto's presidency, well, when Suharto took power from Sukarno's presidency, supported by the U.S. Government, Suharto trying to make a development approach for Indonesian society at that time, but consequently, it had impacted in the poor people to become more poor people. However, for the middle class and higher class, is can and keep their classes. Amid it, the two Islamic organizations such as Muhammadiyah and also Nahdlatul Ulama at that time were becoming the last critical during Suharto's presidency. Because of this, and also this is part of Muslim scholars, and he was part of the activists with Muhammadiyah and also in NGO. He then trying to conceptualize by making the Quran as the source, means that how he's trying to make reinterpretation on the circumstance of revelation as Babu Nuzul or as Babu Nuzul al Quran that are delivered in Medina verses and Makkah verses as his fundamental point of Islamic liberation theology with the historical materialism approach. So here, Muslim Abdul Rahman trying to interpret uh, uh, about this circumstance of revelation. In Makkah verses, for instance, he examined how ideological history exploit amid the lack of social solidarity and exclusion of marginalized social group in Mecca. Here, the group of Christ traders dominated every single life at a time, specifically in the level of social, economy, and political factors. Through their powers, many of inhabit at that time experience the marginalization condition. When to relieve Abrahamic religions, to establish solidarity, the Prophet Muhammad at that time obtained resistance due to the threat of their economic resources for the status worship. So for Muslim Abdul Rahman, Mecca verses reflect the God anger due to Christ traders' greed for their richness, but they didn't want to establish the empathy for poor people and the orphans. Therefore, one of the Mecca verses is Surah Al-Ma'un, containing the critic of religious persons who do not care for the orphan and poor people. Besides, Mecca shaped the context of the structure of operations. Meanwhile, Medina verses reflect the ideal conditions while Muhammad's prophet become the leaders in protecting the first people. Nevertheless, this ideal type of Muslim life is not the final definition dealing with the humanism values as a reference due to many problems that were happening in the city of Medina at the time. Because of this, Abdurrahman asserts that Indonesian Muslim society should making the reference of Mecca verses as the spirit of the liberation to support the lowest class and change the structures of the operations for Indonesian context. Because of this, the question is how Islam transformative could be possible work. Here, there are three factors exactly that Abdul Rahman assert. Firstly, is how the poor people regrouping circle among marginalized people to make a power. And second is making the new economic community a system. And lastly is how trying to empower how to empowering themselves from the victims to become human rights defenders means how they become a poor people but to be a critical thinker and to become advocate for themselves. Surely these factors uh, could be discussed uh, during a question and answer among us. But anyway, uh, there's a thing that I can share dealing with Muslim Abraham work on the Islamic liberation theology for Indonesian context. Previously, I thank you very much. See you guys.